You're watching Euronews now. I'm Takumbo Sulako with your top stories. At least 18 people have been killed by a Russian missile attack on a residential apartment block close to the Ukrainian Black Sea port city of Odessa. The EU Commission President urges Ukraine to speed up reforms if it wants more support for its bid to become an EU member. And riders ready, pedals ready. As the Tour de France's departure begins in Denmark, we'll look at who's favourite to win the world's most famous cycle race.
Ukrainian officials have reported that at least 18 people, including 2 children, have been killed after 2 Russian missiles struck the southern city of Odessa. A multi-storey apartment building and a recreation centre were destroyed in the attack that took place in the early hours of Friday. Over 30 people have been hospitalised and many were trapped in the buildings. An alert urging residents to seek shelter has been issued. Odessa is in a key strategic position on the Black Sea and remains under Ukrainian control. So far, Russian troops have limited their attacks in this area, focusing on the infrastructure linking the region to its European borders.
Just days after Ukraine gained EU candidacy status, the European Commission President has urged the country to accelerate reforms needed to attain full membership. Ursula von der Leyen was speaking in a special address to the Ukrainian Parliament. Amid fears of weakening EU support, she also offered reassurance.
Putin's army is still killing your brothers and sisters. They continue occupying your land, stealing your grain, and bombing your cities. You are fighting back bravely. And Europe will stand up with Ukraine as long as it takes. We will not rest until you prevail.
It will take years for Ukraine to become an EU member, and Brussels requires Kyiv to undertake a raft of anti-corruption reforms before it can happen.
Preventing and combating corruption has been particularly high on your agenda since the Revolution of Dignity. You have created an impressive anti-corruption machine. But now, these institutions need teeth and the right people in senior posts.
Becoming a candidate for EU membership was a huge morale boost for the country. How quickly it achieves that goal is now in its own hands.
Out of mind, but not out of sight. Many European countries are experiencing a surge in new COVID-19 infections. The WHO is keen for the public to remain vigilant, taking action where necessary, but living as much of a normal life as possible.
We should not be complacent. It doesn't mean that people should put their holidays on hold, absolutely not, but we have to protect the vulnerable, vaccinate and get a booster. In countries where there's a sharp increase, it makes sense in crowded, closed settings with not a good ventilation to wear a mask to protect each other. We also know that usually there's a time lag, that a couple of weeks after an increase in new cases, the hospitalizations increase. But again, we shouldn't scare the people not to take any holidays, but to use common sense.
The pandemic has already had a significant impact on Europeans' mental health. Dr. Kluge is now worried that the economic and social effects of the war in Ukraine may be compounding an already bad situation.
Our European region has not been confronted with such a large-scale war since the Second World War, and people are anxious. They're also anxious the impact on themselves, because we see that it becomes more and more difficult for people to pay for their fuel, to pay for some basic things. So the politicians have to take this very, very serious and focus on the most vulnerable in our society, because already during the COVID-19 we saw social fractures and then political extremism. So now with the war we have to pacify and protect the people.
In the waters along the east coast of the USA, This prehistoric species has played a key role in the fight against COVID-19. Horseshoe crabs are unique creatures. Their blood contains cells that the biomedical industry uses to test vaccines to ensure they're not contaminated with bacteria. They've existed for hundreds of millions of years, but loss of habitat and over-farming means that horseshoe crabs are now threatened with extinction. The discovery of their life-saving properties has given rise to a huge industry. More than 500,000 are caught along the Atlantic coast every year.
They really haven't changed in the 450 million years that they've been around. They're really easy to love once you understand them. And they have nothing on them that can hurt you. So they're not threatening at all whatsoever. They're just going about their day.
Experts are holding out hope for the future of this life-saving living fossil.
I believe we've turned the corner, and I think our population is going to do fine, particularly with the introduction of alternative endotoxin tests, which is going to take even more pressure off, and with the work that's being done on alternative baits for the conch and eel fishery, which will take even more pressure off.
Are you drowning in sleaze? Will you suspend Chris Pincher?
He's been away at foreign summits now for some days, but British Prime Minister Boris Johnson came crashing back to reality as he returned to the UK, facing yet another boozy scandal. There are calls to expel his former chief whip, Chris Pincher, from the Conservative Party, after claims he groped 2 men at a private members' club. While he's been a prominent figure on the world stage lately, at home he may be facing another leadership challenge soon. An election for the 1922 committee, which decides many of the Conservative Party's internal rules, is being held in the next few weeks. Those elected could change the party's rules, meaning that Johnson could face another challenge before a 12-month grace period ends. Euronews reporter Vincent McAviney is in London and sent us this report.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is now facing calls to suspend Chris Pincher from his party. That's after he stood down as the Deputy Chief Whip, which is a government position, after allegedly getting drunk on Wednesday night and groping 2 men in a private members club in central London. This is not the first time that he's ran into trouble for making inappropriate passes at people, and it becomes a very difficult situation for the Conservative Party battling with this ongoing sleaze. Now, there are calls from MPs across the House for these matters to be dealt with differently, that the members should be suspended, they shouldn't be able to go into Parliament if there are any investigations ongoing. It's not clear if there are any being undertaken by the police right now, but in a few weeks we've had 2 Conservative MPs have to stand down, one due to watching porn in the House of Commons, another because of sexual assaults on young men. That meant that the party lost both those by-elections. There's also another SNP MP who's recently been in trouble and had an investigation because of inappropriate passes and touching of another young man. So there is a bit of a culture at the moment in Westminster that many say is inappropriate, of sexual assault, but also just a power play between those in positions of responsibility and those more subordinate in the party structure or in their offices when it comes to sexual harassment. Vincent McAviney, Euronews, London.
China's President Xi Jinping has visited Hong Kong, his first trip off the mainland since the COVID-19 outbreak began, to mark the territory's 25th anniversary since it was handed over by British authorities. You can read more about that on our website, euronews.com. Time for us to take a break. We'll be back in a few moments. Welcome back to the programme. Here's a reminder of our top story on Euronews this hour. A Russian missile strike on a residential building in the Ukrainian port city of Odessa has killed at least 17 people, according to authorities. The UN, meanwhile, has warned that 16 million civilians in the country are now in need of basic humanitarian assistance. The Tour de France, the world's biggest and most famous cycling race, is getting underway today in the Danish capital Copenhagen. The competition begins with an individual time trial and 2 more stages in Denmark. This year, 2-time winner Tadej Pogačar is favourite to complete a hat-trick of titles. But the former Olympic cyclist and now commentator Brian Smith says the Slovenian faces a tough challenge from his compatriot Primož Roglič.
You've got Tadej Pogačar, who is the favourite going into this race, twice a winner of the Tour de France, but you've also got Jumbo-Visma, who have brought both Roglič and Vingegaard. So you've got a 2-pronged attack against one rider. Jumbo-Visma seem to think that they have got the answer, but I really do think that the first week, especially in Denmark, as everybody knows, Denmark is flat, it's windy, anything can happen. When it's flat and windy and nervous like the Tour de France, we can have crashes. And let's hope that everybody stays upright. But it could be carnage in the first few days. Then on the 4th day, we go to France. We've got, in Bastille Day, we climb Alpe d'Huez. And, I think in the mountains, Pogačar has already shown that he's a dominant force. So if you want to beat him, you have to think smart about where you're going to attack him. And having 2 riders, Roglič and Vingegaard, that could be the key to success for Jumbo-Visma.
TikTok has become one of the most popular social media platforms for teenagers, with more than 1 billion users worldwide. But recently there has been heightened concern about the impact that the platform has on its younger users. And this has led to a new digital movement online. A community of so-called watchdog mums who use TikTok to produce videos encouraging people to beware of online safety. This ranges from videos encouraging people to avoid potentially dangerous content on the platform, to other videos which are advising parents not to overshare about their private family lives online. Here in the Cube, we spoke to Sarah Adams, or as she's known on TikTok, Mum.Uncharted. And she told us about some of the most worrying content she's seen on TikTok when it comes to child safety.
There are a lot of predatory people on that app who specifically seek out young, vulnerable individuals, and the fact that they have access to those kids is very scary, and that anyone can be anyone. It's really easy to say that you're a 14-year-old girl when you are really a grown man.
Sarah also told us that TikTok has taken action against some of her videos, meaning they are seen by fewer people and her account is sometimes even suspended. Like other platforms, TikTok relies on its users and algorithms to flag potentially violative content. It is then reviewed by a moderator who decides whether or not to remove it. But, like other social media platforms, TikTok has been criticised for not doing enough when it comes to dangerous content. Last year, one of its executives was summoned to testify before the US Senate about the app's impact on children. And in a recent statement to Euronews, a spokesperson for TikTok has said that keeping people safe on the platform is their top priority. We're continuing to invest, they say, in the people, the processes and the technologies that help to keep our community a safe space for positive, creative expression. And for any parents who are perhaps worried about their children using TikTok, Sarah Adams has some more advice.
For parents to have open communication with their children when they are active on social media. And for a parent, that means educating yourself and knowing what the platform is, how it functions, and what your children are seeing on that platform. So parents should download the app themselves, and they should be aware of the content that their children have access to and how their children are using it.
TikTok says it encourages users to flag anything that might violate its community guidelines. But this online community of watchdog mums says that recently the burden is being placed on them.
The social movement launched by firefighters at Roissy-Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris is due to continue for a second day in a row. Approximately 17% of flights are expected to be cancelled during the day. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation has asked airlines to refrain from operating 1 in 6 aircrafts between 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. as a safety measure, and national railway unions have called on labour action next week. Thousands of Sudanese protesters are taking part in mass rallies in the capital Khartoum to demand an end to military rule. At least 7 demonstrators were killed in one of the most violent days this year as part of the security forces' ongoing crackdown on the anti-coup movement in Sudan.
A new Barbie for an old legend. Signature Collection have released a limited edition doll of David Bowie, and no details been spared, from the platform shoes to his iconic red mullet. The retro doll's a celebration of Hunky Dory's 50th anniversary, the artist's 5th album. The 70s star died in 2016, but lives on in his music and Barbie form.
Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in Hong Kong to attend the inauguration of the city's new chief executive of the territory, John Lee. He officiated the swearing-in as the city marks the 25th celebration of the British return of Hong Kong to Chinese rule.
After reuniting with the motherland, the Hong Kong people became the masters of their own city and realized Hong Kong people administering Hong Kong. Hong Kong's true democracy started from here.
John Lee is a former security official who oversaw the crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong following the pro-democracy protests in 2019. Under Beijing's rule for 25 years, freedoms of assembly and speech in Hong Kong feel more eroded than ever.
We are not giving up on Hong Kong. 25 years ago, we made a promise to the territory and its people, and we intend to keep it. Doing all we can to hold China to its commitments so that Hong Kong is once again run by the people of Hong Kong for the people of Hong Kong.
Lee promises to counter fear-mongering and bad-mouthing by critics, raising fears that dissenting voices will be further silenced. President Xi stated he expects Lee's new government to bring refreshing changes to the governance of Hong Kong.
At London's prestigious V&A Museum, Africa fashion retraces the continent's clothes from the years of liberation in the 50s and 60s to today's eclectic and cosmopolitan styles. The normally ubiquitous Dutch Ankara prints of West Africa, with their connotations of cultural appropriation, are here outshone by the sheer variety of indigenous African textiles. It's one of the most important film festivals in Europe, ideally located between East and West. In the spa town of Karlovy Vary in the Czech Republic, the red carpet's rolled out to welcome top-tier stars every year. Ethan Hawke and Johnny Depp came last year, and this time it's Benicio del Toro and Geoffrey Rush. The festival will also premiere a digitally restored adaptation of Milan Kundra's novel The Joke. The 1968 film is part of the Czechoslovak New Wave. It's rarely remembered, but in the 19th century, Venice was ruled by the Habsburg dynasty and was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And Austrian artists were drawn to the charms of the city more than ever before, as this display of some 80 paintings attests. The exhibition also makes use of literature and film to show how a new vision of Venice took shape in the Austrian imagination.
Well, that's it from me and everyone else here at our international headquarters in Lyon. Don't forget, though, that we're here throughout the day to bring you the latest on Europe and beyond. And you can also stay up to date with our top stories by visiting our website, euronews.com.